Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are a returning subscriber, hello, friend. Hope you're having an amazing day. See what happens when you join the Ethics Experts. You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. I am here with my man, Nicolai Ellehuus. How you doing, Nicolai?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And let me just say thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I'm a big fan of this podcast, and
Oh, wow.
I've actually connected with a lot of the previous interviewees that you had just because I thought they had some really cool things to say. So I'm always looking forward to getting my extra greeting as a avid subscriber.
Well,
So
good.
I look forward to that.
Now you get to be here for the extra greetings.
I can't believe it, and I'm very humble. I mean, the range of people that you have here, of scholars and authors, and I it's very humble to hope to have something interesting to say here among all those others interviewees you had.
Well, how kind of you to say. You're in good company, and yeah, I'm really excited to get you on. You first kind of came on my radar when you were nominated for that award from Compliance Week, and as I kind of dug in, I was like, oh man, I got to get this guy in here and pick his brain. For those of you who have been living under a rock and don't follow Compliance Week, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the essence of that category was, and kind of what you did to kind of get on that list.
Yeah, definitely. So Compliance Week, I think this is the second year that they're running this range of awards within the compliance industry. So it ranges from compliance mentor to the chief compliance officer of the year and so on. And I was one of the finalists in the compliance innovator of the year. I think how I got to be there was actually a person that I also teach different enterprise risk management and compliance courses with. He ended up nominating me based on some of the things I'd come up with to manage the Corona pandemic, and
Cool.
more specifically, it was about how to keep compliance, both the compliance program, but also just compliance elements kind of present for everyone working from home. It's a new scenario everyone was facing, staying away from each other as much as possible. So all of a sudden, I didn't have all the communication channels I normally had. I couldn't put roll-ups in the offices. I couldn't put posters. I couldn't be present in the office to just have those coffee chats with people. So both I was kind of disconnected, I think, with everyone as everyone else was. But I also didn't have the same, I think, presence towards everyone in the company. So basically what I came up with, and I think it sounds very, very basic, but was to make some very short homemade videos where I was talking about various compliance issues and topics that everyone should still have at the top of their mind, even though they're working from home. When I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a movie instructor or a director or something like that. And finally, I get to be it during a Corona pandemic and shoot my own little videos, though in a different setting than the Spielberg way, I think.
So tell me about those little videos. I spend so much time talking with folks like you in other organizations, and the thing that we're really pushing is this Compliance 3.0 thing, where it's really kind of moving toward effectiveness. And I just see so many people get so caught up in, well, I don't have the budget, or I don't have the support, or I can't hire a film crew to come out and put together some high production value video. I love the kind of guerrilla marketing or kind of grassroots approach that it sounds like you took. Tell us a little bit about like the nature of those videos and how simple they were relative to the big screen production that we see in the movie theater.
Yeah, definitely, and I mean, and the business I'm in with Bang & Olufsen is a retail business, so definitely a business that has been hit by Corona in the sense that shops were closed, but of course then e-com has gone up as people ordering online instead. So budgets were hit, and I didn't have that budget as well for the big production value, and very much as you say, guerrilla marketing is, I'm not too fancy or think I'm too high on a pedestal to be very basic and take the low hanging fruits if they're there. So what I really did was during the past year, whenever we've had some of these classical, international days of data privacy, anti-corruption, and so on, I would make a video about that topic and put it into a scenario that people within Bang & Olufsen could recognize with. So first off, it was very simple, pretty much like I'm speaking with you, set up my computer a little higher than normal, and then just pushing the record button. And then I had some very basic editing tools at home that I edited and made sure that I did a couple of takes, so at least I wasn't messing up too much. So
Right.
So I think that was the kind of how it started off, and then I actually developed into a still not Hollywood production, but I actually have a small drone that can tape, record as well. And so we were encouraged to all employees to go out and go for a walk, just to make sure we have mental health and so on. So I kind of picked up on that idea, and I said, okay, I will invite everyone with Bang & Olufsen on my own personal walkathon, where I'm kind of recording from a drone,
Cool.
myself walking with my daughter in the baby carriage. And then I just did a speak over talking about gift policy during the International Anti-Corruption Day. So took the production value up a little bit, but still pretty basic and something that I could do.
What a smart move. It's not there's novelty in it, right? You're humanizing compliance in it. You're walking with your daughter. You're just like everybody else, and you're tying it in with some simple tools to get a message across that fights against this forgetting curve that most ethics and compliance, departments have to deal with respect to their workforce due to the way that they interact with them. Again, this is a broad brushstroke, but many ethics and compliance functions are relying on that single pillar training once a year to say, hey, here's our code of conduct. Here's our, here are anti-corruption policies attest to this and all that. Well, we all know that if you don't use that information within a short amount of time, you're just going to forget it. So there's just such an opportunity for ethics and compliance to fight for that attention, because we're in this totally tension economy right now. I love that you innovated by just doing something simple, kind of stepping outside of your lane, so to speak, and getting some more touch points and some more, points of interaction with the broader workforce to not only, humanize and make that connection, but perhaps more importantly, I guess, remind them of these issues are, just because Corona came doesn't mean that anti-corruption is out of the picture, right? Like we have to manage those anti-corruption issues in the context of, in the reality of Corona and this new environment that we're in. So how long were your videos? How did you kind of pick topics, and how did you distribute those things?
Yeah, so the topics were predominantly, again, were kind of tied to these international days of the different topics. So I kind of let that be the cadence, I guess you could call it. And then as for the length of it, I think the longest was probably the drone video, which was about 5 or 6 minutes.
Awesome.
So, pretty short. And I think, we about 800 employees with Bang & Olufsen, and I think I have just over 100 views on it.
Wow.
So for me, I think I'll take that for attendance, and I think that's a good reach on something that I just kind of picked up myself and tried to.
Yeah, you're getting over 10% of your workforce to engage with this thing at some level, and even if they don't watch the whole thing, they're going to be reminded of anti-corruption, or they're going to see that picture of you with your daughter in the baby carriage walking. It's very smart. And then how did you distribute these out? Was that over email? Was it over Slack, or what?
Yeah, so that was in our intranet site that we use SharePoint for. I did a deal with our communication department to put an article on the front page of our what we call BeoWeb, so our intranet site. So whenever someone logged in, and everyone would do that every day.
Yep.
As part of their job, to get updated on recent news and promotions and whatnot, that would be kind of on the top of their screen when they logged in. So at least the visibility was there, and then it was just a matter of people actually pressing that article.
And how hard was that to get the communications department to do this? How many teeth did you have to pull? How many arms did you have to break?
Our communications department, I think, is they are working with limited budget as well as many other, and we have to prioritize that. So anyone that comes to them with a almost done product, as I did, they are all for it, and they're very willing to help. And I didn't need a lot from them in order to accomplish this. So I think that's kind of it was really no hassle. I think it's when it comes to the larger campaigns and so on, where you really need their resources a lot more. That's a bit more planning and making sure it fit into the program. But this was a very straightforward deal for us to see the value in.
So, there's so many takeaways from just this little story, and it makes sense why you made this list. But, the more you can do for them, the easier you can make it for them to say yes, the better, right? So you came to them with something baked. You said, hey, can we just do this? It's no sweat off their back. They don't have to put a whole campaign, as you said, together. It's really kind of plug and play. And I love how you kind of stepped out of the lane, as I said before. You stepped out of the lane and you said to yourself, you know what? I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to solve for the outcome I want. I'm not going to let these constraints of Corona or of budget or of never having, filmed a video before or whatever stop me from reaching that end goal. And you figured out a way to do it. So that kind of tenacity, I think the more that we lean into it, you start to see the opportunity around you, because there's so much DIY stuff you can get. You can download freeware to edit videos. There's, you can spend $5 on an app on your phone that'll let you put text on a video or something like that. The democratization of all of this production, tools, or all these production tools, really opens up a lot of doorways for us who are trying to, again, transact in that information or transact in that attention economy that we're all living in.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was very, as you say, very easy. I think the only really money I spent was to have some music play in the background, and bought a license for that.
Yeah.
So very, very, very low budget. And I think for me it was the biggest thing is I think both as a kind of a chief compliance officer, you want to push some weight in the business in terms of people. They look at you as a role model. You do the right things. You have the right answers, hopefully, to a lot of things. So for me to all of a sudden, I think, expose myself in that way, in just being very honest, I guess, in front of the camera, not a lot of scripted thing in it. And as you say, just showing myself out for a walk in my local neighborhood, it was a little daring for me, and I'm not a natural in front of a camera. But once it's out there and all the positive feedback I got from it, of course, just encourages me to keep on doing that. And again, during, I think, Corona, is that there's a higher acceptance of both trying new ways, whether it's for a compliance program or someone else. And I mean, we're a strong marketing company in the way that we, our marketing material for our products and so on, that's all, very, very high-end professional things. So all of that is, the corporate visual identity and all of that is very closely kind of managed and so on, which it should be for a luxury brand. But I think during that time, here's also a space for everyone to accept, okay, here's not something that has that same, luxurious feel, as long as, of course, it's internally for just the employees as well.
But, I guess what I would kind of posit here is that as we all as a population get, increasingly more bombarded with stimulus on our phone, on our Twitter feed, on whatever, there's like a commensurate drop in the standard for like what's acceptable stimulus. You know what I'm saying? Like there was a time in the 90s or the early 2000s, if you saw something from your corporation that looked like it was filmed on a Steadicam or a hand cam, you'd be like, this looks so freaking cheap. It looks stupid. Yeah. But we've been desensitized to that because everybody's filming on their phone, and all the videos are in, portrait mode instead of landscape mode. Like all those things that used to be sins, as soon as we kind of first got smartphones, again, opens up this opportunity for us. And as that sort of bar for like what's acceptable stimulus drops, what fills that hole is this authenticity piece. And that's something we can all reach for. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm saying that if for us to sort of compete for attention, we needed a high production value video. Well, then there's a bunch of us who could never get that because we don't have the budget, because we don't have the vision at the executive level to spend that money or put those resources to work. Yeah. I'm saying that now we all have authenticity in us. We all have actual authentic relationships in our lives. And if we can get over our own insecurities and drop that guard a little bit and engage in that authenticity, you can start to really supercharge your influence, which I think you've seen firsthand. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, authenticity, I think, it's not necessarily a value I express a lot, but it's definitely something I go by a lot, meaning that, for my professional purposes as a compliance officer, I like to state things as they are. I like to bring out the things that are not working, not by pointing fingers, but kind of summarize, these are the things that are going wrong, and how can we improve those to go forward. I think taking the learnings from those are really valuable. And then also just being able also for myself to state, okay, here's something that I've done wrong. This is not something that's fully functioned. I tried to put in a new process, and here 6 months later, I figure out, okay, it was really never really working the way I thought it would be. And then stepping up and admitting that, I think just to bring that fellowship for compliance, I think this is a big piece of it, not to be a superhuman, but really tell things as they are, and also show that you're just as everyone else, trying to figure out what's the right and wrong thing to do.
Yeah, and I think overcoming that imposter syndrome that many times causes us to retain that sort of facade of inhuman ability, which you just said, ends up compromising our authenticity and ends up creating this sort of avatar of what people assume someone in our role is like. And that's very two-dimensional. It doesn't have that personality piece or that heart piece or that, the frustration piece or whatever those things that are part of the sort of human experience that make us who we are. And that kind of straightforward, hey, reality is our friend. I tried this, it didn't work. It just makes you so much more approachable. It makes you so much more human, and thus makes your message so much more, palatable for folks whose behavior you're trying to influence.
I think the lucky thing for me, and I kind of, when I look back at my career, a lot of it is, there are a lot of points where I can nail down that this was a lucky turning point for me. And one important experience I had was very early on in my career, where I was tasked to manage a very large project, and I think it took about 4 months, and we kind of had to acknowledge that I had full on failed on. It was introducing a global a guideline based on different policies within compliance area. Yeah. And I had failed because I both misunderstood, I guess, the scope of it. I misunderstood the key stakeholders in it and the key audience. and recognizing that I had failed on something that had that magnitude and was really important to the business was really important for me, and lucky for me to think, okay, wait, it's good for me to acknowledge these things. And then the key learning for me at that point was to take a project manager course. So I up my skills in managing large scale projects, something that, just because you're a licensed attorney doesn't mean you're a natural born project manager.
Right.
So that was a realization there. And all of those things that I learned for that, I've used ever since. And being a compliance officer is being a project manager for a large part.
Right.
So I was just lucky to have that, and I think being humble about that experience. And I bring it up over and over again when I kind of say, okay, I fail as much as the next guy. So I think that authenticity is really important. And
you probably also learned that the cost of failure is probably not as high as you thought it was before it happened. Not to say that we be laissez-faire or flippant about failing. Obviously, we want to succeed and hit our objectives and so forth. But I just find so many people get so nervous about failing that fear of failure ends up paralyzing them in some ways and causes them not to stretch and so forth. And, if you're not failing, I think you're not learning. And all those failures are really kind of opportunities for lessons. And look at this lesson that failure has created for you. It's something that you carry forward and use as a tool and a point of leverage in other interactions in different organizations and different projects or whatever down the road. It's a great learning that you were able to kind of synthesize into almost a strength for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I think it spans, wider than that as well, because if it's, it's the failure and it's the tough times where you really grow. I mean, when I look back, it's, I was in a company where we had a really big transformation of the entire company. We had to move departments away from certain countries. We had to lay off people. And I was kind of the ambassador for a lot of these initiatives. So having to deal with all of that and having people express anger and just being sad about being laid off, and I had to be the guy absorbing all of this. Extremely tough time, I think, to be the representative of these decisions being made by top management. But when I look back at it, I mean, it really I learned so much from it, and I learned that having a big respect about investigations and all that when you're really dealing with personal private life as well, and maybe able to impact them on their employment. I have a huge respect of that, and because I know it affects me as well as a person to be dealt with that responsibility. And the same now, I guess, when Corona hits, again, a challenging time for most, and then something like this pops up, you have to think creatively, you have to come up with new ways, and that's where you keep learning. Okay, maybe I don't need always the big production value Hollywood movie, but I could do with my little drone and my girl in her baby carriage, and that will actually get something across as well. So I think these challenges are great opportunities to grow and learn. That definitely, that's for sure.
So let's go back. You grew up wanting to be a movie director. What was it about that was so interesting to you? And then how did your career take that right turn or left turn, I don't know, to wind up now in the compliance game, getting nominated for such a prestigious award? How did you get to where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know how I got lost from the movie director profession. I think in 8th grade in Denmark, everyone has to spend 2 weeks working somewhere to get a little insight into, I guess, how it is once you're done with school.
Yeah.
And I applied for a 2-week apprenticeship with my favorite program on TV that was reviewing computer games and
cool.
Cartoons and stuff. And I got rejected from that apprenticeship, and instead I got an apprenticeship in a finance department in a large pharmaceutical, and that was very far from what I was thinking I wanted to be. So I think maybe that was what put off that dream.
Dream, yeah.
It shattered my dreams. I never got back to it.
8th grader, man.
Yeah. So no, but again, pure luck, really, that I am where I am. I guess after in law school, I really chose to study law because it was like an open book. It wasn't really putting me in a box of a very, very certain profession. It
Right.
seemed like something I could use to a lot of different things. And primarily, I think I used it for going out exploring abroad as well. I had a lot of opportunity to study a year in France and study a year in the US, and I just that's always been a part of my life, working in international settings and going abroad. So that was primarily, I guess, what I used the law school for. But at the same time, when I kind of look back at it, there's some indications that I think give a good sign of where I am today, because I remember for my bachelor thesis, I wrote about the criminal in the criminal act, and how we how we penalize rape, and then the possibilities of opening up a lesser degree of proof of rape in order to target date rape cases and married rape cases. So I was very interested in the kind of like criminal aspect of law. And then later on, for my master thesis, I wrote about law of conflicts. So the definition of torture right at that time was when waterboarding was being discussed as an interrogation method, and whether that was legal or not, or could be considered torture. So not to say that being a compliance officer necessarily has a lot with those things to do, but at least there are aspects of what is right and wrong, what is what are sanctions that you apply towards behavior that is wrong. So I think that's at least a little bit of a small sign of where I am today, that those aspects of law school kind of, I guess, intrigued me in some way. And then really my first job again was very weird. I applied for different jobs, and I ended up in a bank and working with corporate governance issues. And then about 3 months after I started, there was some new EU legislation coming into place called the Markets in Financial Instruments Directive, which was a huge piece of legislation trying to address investor protection and increasing control mechanisms in financial institutions. And it brought along a requirement to have a compliance function in financial institutions, so pension funds and banks and insurance companies, for instance. And I was the last guy to join the legal department, and they kind of said, well, "Hey, new guy, couldn't this be something that you take care of?"
This sounds
for
right
us?
up your alley, since you're new.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I had no clue what compliance was all about. And luckily, they hired in a manager that had a little more insights into it. But we kind of started that up, built a compliance team. I then moved on to be the group anti-money laundering officer, dealing with insider trading cases, and actually ended up filing a report on what became the largest insider trading case in Denmark ever to be.
Wow!
Because it was something we caught in the systems there.
From some of the controls you put into place, was able to kind of grab this transaction.
Yes, correct. Yeah. And interesting then, I moved on to a large pharmaceutical company where that person who was the insider had been employed.
Really?
So it was very interesting because, of course, I had seen the entire case from my perspective, working in the bank, filing this case to the public prosecution office. And then I moved into the legal department in this pharmaceutical company, and I could kind of get what happened at their side of things when they were, so how they kind of put that whole case together from the public prosecution office. It was just really an interesting move. But primarily, I was there to help ensure compliance with a deferred prosecution agreement that the pharmaceutical had made with the Department of Justice in the US, because they had violated the UN sanction regime against Saddam Hussein and Iraq at the time.
Got it.
So they had a 3-year agreement there that they had to put a lot of resources and focus into compliance. So spent a lot of good years there, and had secondments again to the US and China as well.
Oh, cool.
Lived for a couple of months in Beijing, and then moving on to another pharmaceutical, setting up again a compliance area and legal department for them, just covering the Nordic areas. And then the last job I had was in a medical device company as a chief compliance officer, setting up a global compliance program again.
Wow.
And now here at Bang & Olufsen, again, setting up a new compliance program. So that's kind of been the thing, at least from now, that has always been, I guess, my game has been setting up new compliance programs. But it also makes sense in Denmark, and I think in Europe in general, we are 15, 20 years behind the US on compliance. I was lucky. I got to be asked to take care of compliance right at the time when compliance became a legal requirement in the first industry in Europe in 2007.
That's in the banking industry?
That was in the banking industry. And maybe some, of course, have worked with it before, but more on a voluntary basis. And now you can kind of see in Europe that has had a spillover effect from the financial sector to pharmaceutical area and other big industries, mining and construction and so on. And now here in consumer goods, luxury goods that I'm in now, has also started to recognize that perhaps there's something that could bring value to the business. So I was just very lucky.
Yeah, very, very lucky, very cool experiences. And it's almost like you've ridden this sort of compliance wave as it's crashed across Europe. First it was in financial, and then you transitioned over to pharma and medical device, and now it's now it's kind of washing on the shores of consumer goods, and you've just been kind of riding this thing the whole way. I'd love to talk about kind of what that was like, moving from, you came into the bank right as this stuff was kind of kicking off. You got assigned this thing. Then you moved over to the pharmaceutical side. What were the biggest differences between those two different sort of spheres or industry realms? And what were some of the similarities that you were able to draw on from your previous experience in financial to like magnify your impact as you were standing up that program in pharmaceutical?
Huge difference. I don't think that's a difference just between the particular bank I was in and the particular pharmaceutical I was in. So the difference really being, I think when you work in a pharmaceutical company or medical device and probably a lot of other industries as well, that the product that you are putting out really makes a difference for the people who have to take the drug that you're making or use the device that you're manufacturing. And it really, it needs to create a positive impact on that person. Right. That's why you're doing it. And at the same time, everyone, at least from my experience, have a really good understanding that you have to have very high set of quality mindset in order to not mess this thing up. You have to put a product on the market that is exactly what you promise it to be, because at the end of the day, you can really hurt someone if you don't do that. So from what I've seen, at least, I think a lot of people working in the pharmaceutical area, they have a mindset where they understand if something kind of needs to be done, whether it's a regulatory requirement or simply because it's kind of the right thing to do, you will not have a lot of discussions on it, because people just say, okay, well, of course we need to do this. We have to do the best thing that is out there.
It's almost like they're more susceptible to compliant behavior given the industry they're in and the impact that product is meant to have on the buyer.
And you have a lot more departments kind of preaching this. You have a regulatory department, you have a quality department. All these departments are huge in the pharmaceutical industry. So I think even if you work in marketing or something, you are hit by a lot of different departments that are all preaching the same, values and quality mindset. So you really have no place there if you don't buy into that. And so it's not just the compliance department that is doing that. In the bank that I worked at, I think, extremely competitive environment. If you're not selling enough, if you're not a good enough trader, whatever it can be, if you sink to that bottom 25% of the performance, you're out the door pretty quick.
Right.
So of course that competitiveness,
Breeds
that
moral
can
hazard, kind of.
bring forth a lot of good things, but it can also trigger some behavior that's not necessarily the best. And of course, then even more so important that you have a good compliance function, internal audit, legal function, HR functions, and so on that can kind of balance these things out. But definitely, I would say for sure, there's a different mindset. You don't have the same, quality mindset that you probably would have in the pharmaceutical sector. So in terms of being a compliance officer, you have to be very much even more skilled to work, I think, in the financial sector. You have to be really good at marketing, selling in, what it is that you're here to do and how you can help. And you're kind of being given a lot of that already in the pharmaceutical sector. I mean, this is very generalizing, but
Sure.
I think those are some of the conclusions that I've tried to draw from.
Yeah, it's almost in the financial sector because, it's like there the product is money, essentially. I mean, that's a very sort of dumbed down distillation of it, but the product over there is money. The product on the pharma side is making someone's life longer or healing them or some kind of, something kind of, like you said, a positive impact. So on that financial side, in many cases, you're kind of swimming upstream, so to speak, because not everybody has that same, life over everything, so to speak, type of mentality that's on the pharma side.
And I think, again, it's generalizing, but a lot of places you end up, I think, when you work at compliance, you say, okay, a lot of the key risks are with sales, because they are they're the front people who are out there trying to sell the product. They're out there talking to the external parties and so on. So that's where naturally a lot of the risk are, not necessarily stating that those people are more bad than anyone else, but of course they work in an environment where they have to balance a lot of things and so on, that if you work in a headquarters setting, in a back office function, you just don't have those challenges. But I think also in what I saw is that in the financial sector, you also do hire a lot of, very young people right out of school, because they're able to they don't need the same expertise, I guess. Whereas in pharmaceutical sector, I think a lot of the sales staff, they're educated nurses and healthcare professionals that have worked in those professions in a hospital setting and so on. So I think they have a longer, professional history before they become a sales rep for the pharmaceutical. And I think also perhaps it's just, it's a different preparation for that high risk environment that you're in when you are a sales rep.
So it's kind of interesting, right? So there's this in portfolio theory. If you're building an investment portfolio and you're young and it's your first year working, you can be extremely risky, right? You can be very, you don't have to be that risk averse. You have a high risk tolerance. But then if you're 5 years from retirement, that portfolio needs to shift towards something that's very safe because you need to keep your nest egg and so forth. So there's this general sort of decline, or I guess this increase in like risk aversion as we age. And it's interesting you talked about those workforces in general, again, broad brushstrokes, but these workforces in general are relatively at different sort of tenures in their career, different maturation in terms of how they view risk and so forth. And that in and of itself can kind of give you another leg up from a compliance or an ethical perspective, because those people are a little bit more well-versed. They're going to be a little bit more risk averse, and they're going to understand the bigger picture in terms of, the only shortcut is really a long cut, and I got to do this thing right,
Yeah. No, I think that's for sure. And I guess, I mean, a lot of this is, perception, but I don't know if there's also something that can be attributed to, when you are in a business school, you probably already there get a little more competitive mindset.
Right.
There are big consultancies out there. You want to be with McKinsey, Boston Consulting, or one of the big investment banks, or Goldman, and so on. So there's a huge competitiveness in the field of study even already. And whereas I think if you train to become a nurse or a healthcare professional, the jobs out there, there's not a high unemployment rate, and whether you work at one hospital or another, it probably doesn't make the same difference as you feel like when you're in the business setting at a business school. So in terms of that acceptance of risk and so on, what do I do to get ahead a little bit? That could also already there be a trigger to some point.
Yeah, that's a huge point. I kind of like to joke around that nobody is. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so no one is trying to choose between being a bond trader and being a compliance officer. To your point, those paths are very different. The incentives along those paths, the payoffs are denominated in different things, right? One is sort of money focused, one is maybe making a difference in the world focus or whatever. And so just dialing in your understanding of what the generalized sort of path of folks in your organization are can give you some insights into what kind of behaviors you might need to curtail and what kind of policies or interactions or attention grabbing pieces you're going to need to steer those behaviors toward the right direction.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I mean, I think that's one, I keep thinking about what can I improve, of course, of the compliance program that I'm working on, and what's the next step. And I think for sure, I mean, the whole what data can I get to show me where I need to make a difference, but also the whole behavioral analytics part of thing. Why do people do as they do? Why do certain type of risk always present themselves if you're part of a management group? How does it be if you're already a part of the sales staff? And that whole incentive, why do you do what encourages you to do something, what triggers you, and I think if I've been a psychologist or something, that would have been perfect background as a compliance officer as well, because that's great insights to have that I don't naturally have from being a lawyer, but it's something that I recognize it's a huge part of my job as well, and have to think about that.
Well, who should be the behavioral science experts in the organization? Marketing, maybe. Finance, probably not. It's probably not going to be the salespeople unless, I mean, beyond the extent that they utilize that to generate sales. If we're trying to, if our greatest assets are our people, then the ethics and compliance or the HR functions, which essentially manage and are stewards of those people, need to be those experts, and they should be the ones to be able to speak into conversations that they're tangentially a part of to drive toward the goal of that specific department, assuming again that is in line with the broader goal of the organization. So, none of this stuff, we all may be wired a little bit differently. Our personality types might open us up to tune in more to, how someone is wired or to read the room better or whatever. But just like anything, that is a field of study that is totally complementary to our basic field of study, which is ethics and compliance, similar to how you took that project management course because, hey, this is all project management, and that's not something that I'm just born with. We also should be educating ourselves on this behavioral science piece so that we understand how people are, wired, how they're going to respond to things. And I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about the role that incentives play in the behaviors that we see people exhibit. And, we can talk about kind of positive incentives or negative incentives or implied incentives, but so much of that is what governs us. And so much of those incentives, many of them, again, are subconscious or they're unspoken, are what sort of create the guardrails around whatever culture we're living in.
No, I think definitely incentives is an important element to consider why people do different things. You have the fraud triangle to say, okay, when do you have that perfect storm of someone being able and wanting to commit fraud for a company? So there are some incentives in some ways there, or at least some possibilities to act. But I think if I just start with my own person and my own function that I have in a company, then what is my incentive? I think it's a difficult job that I have,
Yeah.
in the sense that I have to be really a voice that asks some questions sometimes at very difficult times, and I have to ask them to people who are in charge of things. So I think that in itself is a very difficult role to fill. And what is my incentive to really do that, and not just have some cultural numbness
Totally.
about, well, we'll let this thing slide and it'll make my day easier if I don't have to have that tough discussion with someone. So I guess one thing is, when I'm being employed by a company, I require a pretty long termination period, because that's a incentive period term for me to be able to speak up towards management.
Yeah, right.
If I know I don't have a 1 month termination period, my incentive to perhaps ask some difficult questions and so on, that should hopefully reduce that risk for me, because I know, okay, if I have a long, then at least I have a long time to figure something else out if
Yeah,
I'm
right.
being fired because I asked these difficult questions. So I think that's one incentive that you can say for me. And then I know in the financial sector, for instance, it really has it's required that the bonus incentive should not be a too large part of a compliance officer's role within Europe, at least within this piece of regulation that come into force. Because of course, the higher the bonus and short-term KPIs that the company wants to fulfill, the less likely you are as a compliance officer to stop any of those business deals from materializing, if they are at least unethical, but perhaps business positive for on a financial perspective. So for me, that could be, and of course, another incentive for me personally in lifting my role is how much of my salary is a fixed salary and how much is a bonus salary.
Right.
And if I was fully commission paid or bonus paid, I think that would have a detrimental impact on the function that I play. So similarly, if I twist that around for people who have other functions where the very largest part of the salary could be a bonus, then of course, what are the things that they are triggered by? And I'm not going to. I haven't been, I guess, successful, and I really haven't tried it in any of the jobs that I had to necessarily minimize the bonus payout that typically, let's say, a sales rep would be getting.
Right.
But what I would like is to introduce a compliance element in before they get that bonus payout. So have they had any misconduct? Have they had any policy violations in the past year? And I think that's been the most tangible way of trying to keep some incentive on ethical conduct. But I also, in some ways, think it's a bit negative way. If you haven't had anything negative conduct, you can get your full. How about we perhaps incentivize good behavior? If you've done something extremely well, to promote compliance, ethical conduct. We know you were caught in that difficult situation and you did the right thing for the company. On an ethical perspective, you will get an additional bonus or something like that.
Like an ethics bonus or something.
Yeah, I mean I always like doing competitions. I always like doing these things to promote my compliance program. So whenever I launch something, I always trigger it to some kind of competition and give an award and so on. But if we could do that in a bonus scheme of things, maybe that would be, I think that in a lot of sense, even more positive than if you just say, we will withhold some of your bonus if you don't.
Because withholding the bonus is a stick, and giving the bonus for ethical behavior is sort of more of a carrot. And generally, you're going to get better sort of performance out of some balance of the two, but really over proportion of that positive reinforcement can be better. So let's switch gears a little bit. You've stood up how many programs at this point? 6, 5 or 6?
Yeah, 5. Yeah.
So you've learned a lot along the way. Each one gives you a bunch of experiences that you can carry forward to the next one, puts more tools in your toolbox that you can use to build your next house. When you know, there's something about this that you like, unless you're a total masochist and you hate it and you just throw yourself in these situations, but there's something about it you like. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, like, what is it you like about standing up a program, in terms of the impact that you can see or whatever. And then also, what is your mentality when you're starting from scratch on that blank canvas when there's no program in place? How do you sort of start to build your program or build your project, management Gantt chart of which things you're going to attack first and so forth?
Yeah. Well, I guess to the first part of the question, whether I'm a masochist, I guess to some extent I am, because I think I often do come home after a work day and think, why the hell am I in this job function? Because this is no easy task at all, and having these quarrels with yourself. Did I do the right thing? Did I speak up enough about this issue? Did I stand by my own beliefs and ethical values? And I think, for instance, on my LinkedIn profile, I think I've phrased in my kind of a catchphrase something about that I have a pragmatic approach to problem solving. But I think really that's only one part of me, because I'm also an idealist caught in the body of someone who's a pragmatist. so I think I'm in this job function because I, by nature, I'm a little bit of an idealist. When I see someone jaywalking, when I see someone cutting off someone, not just me, but someone else in line, all these things, it triggers something in me. Yeah. So I don't necessarily have the right compass or the right balance between what is right and wrong. I don't claim to have that, but I can feel in my body that it probably triggers a little bit more of me than other people when I see something that I don't feel is right. So of course, in that sense, this job is perfect for me, because that's a big part of it, is trying to advise a company and the management about what is probably the right thing, and not just in a compliance sense with being in compliance with the law, but also from the ethics sense, is this really the right thing to do? So of course I'd like to do that, but at the same time I have to be pragmatic about it, and also know that not everyone feel the same as me. Operating a listed company on a stock exchange, or even just privately owned company, there are a lot of gray areas that you operate in. There are decisions being made where you have to accept risk. Perhaps you don't dig into all of the risk because you're too afraid of what you figure out, and all of these things. And I have to be pragmatic about it in order to be able to keep working in a company and accept that those are the terms that an international business operates in. But at least I have a sphere of influence where I can try to say, okay, is this the right thing to do? And I guess. I guess that's the masochist in me that kind of like to be put in that situation. So I think that speaks a little to why am I in this job, that it fulfills the idealist of me, and at the same time I do have that pragmatist and trying to balance all of this and help the management make the right decisions. I guess at the end of the day is something that intrigues me. As to the kind of the second part of the questions on what my approach is when I start off with a new job of implementing a compliance program, I definitely. I guess the structure to it is to make this gap analysis. I guess regardless of what industry I'm in, regardless of the maturity of the company that I'm in, whether it's listed, privately owned, whatever, I like to just kind of get my bearings. Okay, where are we at? So I have my key elements. I have the is there a function already? Is there a mandate by the board of directors? Those are kind of just the organizational pieces of it. Then is there a enterprise risk management process in place that can provide some guidance as to the risk that we're dealing with? Is there any training in place, policies and guidelines in place? Are there any controls in place? How's the tone from the top? How's communication in general in this, the open door policy and whatnot? How are there due diligence in place for third parties? And is there a speak up culture? Is there a compliance hotline, whistleblower hotline? And is there any type of kind of standard reporting going up to the board of directors and management? And I think those are all the elements that I will make the gap analysis on, say what's in place, where should we probably be considering the scope of our business, the nature of the product that we have, and so on, and then start to have those discussions. And so I think that's the kind of the core process I focus on. And then luckily that opens the door on talking to a huge amount of people within the company, working across all these elements. But then I'm very, very focused on just trying to come across as nice as possible, because last thing I want to be is the policeman. And I think here they hadn't had this function before. And I don't think necessarily in this industry like luxury goods and the type of consumer goods that we're in, that it's very normal to have a compliance department. So there were not a lot of people working here that had a preconception of what a compliance officer is doing, what a compliance program is doing. Whereas in pharmaceutical, financial sector, they all know about it. So if you have had a predecessor that's been the policeman, that's a difficult thing to come in and change people's mind that this is something else. So luckily I wasn't met by that, at least in my current function. And I think in general terms, I've been able to still come across as the nice guy that people want to talk to, and not the police officer at all.
So let's do this. That was great. I think so many folks, when they step in and they have to stand up a program, they're like, where do I start? And taking that kind of analytical approach to say, like, okay, what's in place? What kind of mandates are there? External, internal? What kind of things do we have in place that I could perhaps repurpose? Let's build this gap analysis, and then we start having conversations with folks. Gives you so much opportunity not only to build your case and get a high confidence interval around the path you need to take to wind up at the program that you need, but also, to your point, gives you that opportunity to have those interactions with folks and start to build those relationships. Because look, at the end of the day, if you're not a police officer, you don't have a gun on your hip, you can't force people at gunpoint to have ethical behavior. They have to do it from some discretionary, bucket of effort. So I just love that kind of risk-based approach, that top-down approach to get the lay of the land and so forth. Let's do this. Let's say I have a magic Zoom meeting set up between you and you 20 years ago. What advice would you give your younger self?
I think for sure is that if you want to work with compliance, do not take things personally. I mean, it's been the number one struggle I've had. I would say at least for the first 6 years of being employed full time, working as a compliance officer, because you are being. I've never met, I think, people who are aggressive towards me or anything like that. But I definitely have met a lot of people who are challenging me on whether, I'm just some guy who comes in and stops all the fun. and what are all these different things that they need to do all of a sudden, and
Yeah.
why can't they just do as they always did? All these very classic challenges. And for the first many years, I took these things personally. I took them home with me.
Yeah.
Why don't they like me? Why, all of these things, and I couldn't separate the function that I played, the advice that I was giving to Nicolai, the private person.
Right.
And that really, I think, impacted me. It made the job much more harder than what it had to be. And since I've been able to put that away, it's been such an easier job, and I think that's made everything a lot easier. So that's by far the number one advice I would give myself, a long time ago.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'm going to take some of that advice myself.
Yeah.
It's so hard to separate because we put so much of ourselves into our work. We care so much about it, right? We are our work in this knowledge work economy. So it's hard to separate those things from, like you said, the role that I'm playing and the person that I am,
Yeah, and I think, it is impossible to separate, but at least having that acknowledgement that there is a difference. And I think from one of your other podcast episode, you discussed with someone about how everything is personally. Right. Whatever you do in your job, establishing relationships, that is personal things. Right. You are interacting with people, so right. you can't say
by
don't
definition.
take this. By definition, right. you cannot say this is not personal, right. Because it is. When you interact with people, it is personal. But still, again, it's like, what is this person getting mad about? Well, it's that person is probably getting mad that you're changing something he was used to be able to do. That has nothing to do with you as a person.
Right.
So being able still to separate that, and I think some of my greatest success as well has been when I've had that feeling that I'm starting to go down a wrong path with someone who's a key stakeholder of mine. So I've worked with a person I remember that worked in marketing, and we seemed to kind of keep getting small conflicts, and the conflicts were getting a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and it was getting to the point where we started to cut, in email correspondence, all of a sudden copy in, higher up management and so on, to put more pressure on. And finally, I was just like, this is really not going to end well. So I just pulled up the courage to go and have a conversation with that person, and we chatted for an hour or so, and I just started the conversation and say, I feel we're starting to move down a path I don't like. Why don't we just kind of talk this out? And we cleared so many misunderstandings. We had the best collaboration afterwards, and being able to take that tough conversation was amazing, and it's been a guiding star for me ever since to try and do that whenever I have someone that I can feel this is really not going well, to try and just stop up and have that conversation.
Yeah, it's so smart to do that, because to your point, that person on the other side of that conversation, they're taking stuff personally as well. And at some level, we're all sort of searching for security, and we achieve that through control, or we achieve that through approval, or some balance between those things. And many times when you're coming in with a new policy that's threatening someone's control over their process, or the smoothness with which their business operates or their unit operates or something, that ends up turning into a lack of control that threatens that security. So many times, to your point, it's coming from this visceral place with someone, and it can very quickly get off on that bad path. So good on you for learning that lesson. I mean, it's kind of cliche to say, but like, life is relationships, and especially in the ethics and compliance game, because we don't have that positional authority, we have to lean into more influence, and that opens up the gate for us for a ton of magic to happen, a ton of persuasion to happen, a ton of new relationships to be built. And I always kind of talk about this, but like, the relationship between, your effort and the impact that you have in your organization, whether that's risk elimination, or that's, organizational influence, or whatever that impact is, that doesn't necessarily have to be a linear relationship. That can be a parabolic relationship. And many times there's so many tools in place within a business. I mean, a business of some sizes are going to have a bunch of different functions and a bunch of different things in place that you can use as leverage points to really accelerate that impact per unit of effort in your organization. But it takes doing things like this. It takes getting the drone out. It takes, giving something fully baked over to communications for them to just drop it on SharePoint with no sweat off their brow. It takes putting your pride aside and looking at the longer game and reaching out to somebody for a cup of coffee or going out to lunch to smooth over any rough spots that you might be feeling as you're trying to push whatever change, is there. And really what I think we're talking about, and I think you emulate, magnificently, is bringing that humanity into our jobs. Like, if the assets, so to speak, are human beings, and those human beings' behaviors in aggregate, build up to the risk profile of our organization, and that's what we're fighting against, well, then we have to figure out how to change all those behaviors. And there's 1,000 ways to do it that are beyond reading a regulation or, typing up a policy that checks all the regulatory boxes. We have to influence those behaviors, and that's going to come through that authenticity and through those relationships and things like that. So this has been a phenomenal episode. Thank you so much for coming on, Nicolai. I want to be conscious of time. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they find you to see some more of your genius and bask in the glow of your ideas?
I think it's pretty simple. I'm on LinkedIn, and I do from time to time share some observations that I think I have. So far, it's been very linked to kind of the development of compliance as a discipline in Denmark and the Nordic countries, and the whole thought about the Nordic countries being some of the least corruptive countries in the world. Whereas when you live here, you do see things happen, and you start to question really the results of the CPI. But of course, hope that they are true. So I share some thoughts about that sometimes in articles on LinkedIn, and I really welcome, and you've inspired me to reach out to a lot of other people that you had on your show, and I've set up a few calls with some of them just to really get more inspiration. So please link up with me on LinkedIn for whoever is listening in here, and I'll be happy to get more inspiration. I have so much to learn still in this space, and I just want to keep learning, keep building on getting some input as well.
But that learning opportunity that you have is the same one that I have, the same one that all of us have, because our profession is not mature yet. It's still changing, and there's so much going on with it. And I'm going to keep singing this song from the rooftops that we have a very special community in the ethics and compliance space. I'm sure none of those people you reached out to didn't give you the time of day. I'm sure they all hopped on the phone with you, and I'm sure you guys had a great conversation, and you were able to share some things with them, and you were able to get some things from them to implement in your own thing. And we will continue to build this community, and this community is going to continue to be the differentiator for us to drive more influence in our organization. So thank you for being the example of this Compliance 3.0 leader. Thanks for coming on and being so generous with your time and your insights. This was really a lot of fun, man.
No, it's definitely my pleasure. And thank you for being a facilitator of getting the community together in this as well. Thank you so much.
All right, until next time.